Land Rover's current lineup logs 274 problems per 100 vehicles, worse than almost every brand JD Power tracks. Land Rover also claims 70% of everything it has ever built is still on the road. Same badge, one number is marketing, the other is stamped on 10 chassis numbers you can still buy now. Number 10, the Series 1. Built from 1948 to 1958, Rover sketched the shape on an Anglesey beach because post-war Britain had a steel shortage and a surplus of aircraft-grade aluminum with nowhere else to go. The result was a box-section steel chassis wrapped in aluminum alloy body panels that simply do not corrode the way the rest of the car does. Around 8,000 were sold in the first year alone, a volume Rover never planned for and scrambled to meet with export orders. The original 80-inch wheelbase grew to 86 and 88 inches for short wheelbase models, then out to 107 and 109 for the long ones. Very early Series is, built before mid-1951, used constant four-wheel drive through a freewheel mechanism, rather than the selectable system that came after. Own one now and you inherit the same design logic that convinced armies and aid agencies across East Africa to standardize on one vehicle for 2 decades. The alloy body hides one problem: the panels resist rust. The chassis underneath them does not, and a Series 1 that spent 30 winters somewhere wet has usually eaten itself from the frame rails up, while the bodywork above it looked untouched. The vehicles worth buying now are the ones with a documented chassis swap, matching engine and body numbers, and a paper trail proving the ROT was cut out before it reached anything structural. Clean, numbers matching Series wins with a replaced galvanized chassis now clear more at auction than the sticker price of a new base model Land Rover Discovery Sport. And scarcity did that, not sentiment. The Series 2 fixed exactly one of these problems. Number 9, the Series 2 and IA, built from 1958 to 1971. The Series 2 arrived with deeper box section sills and a new 2.25-liter petrol engine, and it is the generation where the 500,000th Land Rover rolled off the line, a milestone that meant the design had already outlived its original 2 to 3 year production plan by more than a decade. Engineers designed it after the Oxford and Cambridge Trans-Africa expeditions showed exactly how far from a workshop these vehicles would end up, so every component could be rebuilt roadside with hand tools, including a full engine overhaul with the block still in the chassis. The IA brought a 2.25-liter diesel in 1961, then a 2.6-liter petrol for long wheelbase models and servo-assisted brakes. Buy a well-sorted Series 2A, now in the ownership case is simple. Parts interchange across a production run measured in the hundreds of thousands. Independent mechanics anywhere in the world already know the platform and the diesel option, while genuinely underpowered next to the petrol, will run for decades on basic maintenance and nothing resembling a diagnostic laptop. Then Land Rover made the whole thing modern. Number 8, the Series 3, built from 1971 to 1985. The changes look cosmetic on paper: a plastic dashboard instead of the old metal panel, a plastic grille, an all-synchro gearbox. But underneath, the 2.25-liter 4-cylinder petrol engine stayed a cast iron 8-to-1 compression unit that would run on whatever fuel a given country actually had. 77 horsepower at 4,250 revolutions per minute and 128 pound-feet of torque at just 1,500 revolutions per minute does not sound like much next to a modern crossover, but that torque curve is exactly why police forces, armies, and aid agencies on 5 continents standardized on the Series 3 instead of something faster and more fragile. What almost nobody outside the community talks about is how much of the Series 3's reputation actually belongs to the diesel variant, which most enthusiasts consider the weak point of the range. Underpowered and slow, it nonetheless returned 25 to 28 miles per gallon and kept running long after the more desirable petrol and V8 versions had been sold off as restoration projects, because nobody wanted the diesel enough to wear it out. Choosing the right Series 3 means choosing function over flattery, the same trade every original buyer made, and 4 decades later, the vehicles that survived are the ones nobody thought were worth stealing. Add a V8 permanent 4-wheel drive, collectors notice. Number 7. The Stage 1 V8, built from 1979 to 1985. Land Rover took the standard Series 3 body and dropped in a detuned version of the 3.5-liter Range Rover Vibe 8. Then paired it with permanent 4-wheel drive instead of the selectable system every other series vehicle used. A precise production total for the Stage 1 V8 is not something I can verify the way the mainstream Series 3 numbers can be, so treat any specific unit count you see online as an estimate, not a fact. What is well documented is the outcome: a Land Rover with genuinely usable low-end torque instead of the wheezy 4-cylinder, wrapped in the same rebuildable farmer-proof body as every other Series 3 on the road. You are not paying for a badge that photographs well outside a hotel. You are paying for the one series body that can keep up with modern traffic without the engine sounding like it is filing a complaint. The next transitional generation traded mechanics for electronics. Number 6. The Defender TD5, built from 1998 to 2006. This was the first Land Rover diesel controlled entirely by an ECU instead of a mechanical injection pump, a project Land Rover internally called Storm, and it introduced drive-by-wire throttle to a vehicle whose previous generation could be repaired with a socket set and a Sunday afternoon. In its first production run, Land Rover recalled 10,000 TD5 powered Discovery and Defender models built between September 1998 and June 1999 over a flywheel assembly fault, and early engines carrying the 10P casting code through 2001 are known for an oil pump bolt that can work loose and take the whole bottom end with it if nobody catches it in time. Injector harness O-rings fail and let oil migrate straight into the ECU housing. None of that erases what the TD5 became once Land Rover fixed the 15P engines from 2002 onward. It is a genuinely torquey, smooth, capable 5-cylinder that plenty of specialists now call one of the best diesels the company ever built, provided the specific engine in front of you has the documented fixes and not just a seller's word for it. Buying a TD5 says something different about you than buying a 300 TDI 2 spots down this list. You wanted the extra power, and you accepted that somebody else's early mistakes are now baked into the used market you are shopping in. The luxury side of the family has a reputation. Number 5. The Range Rover Classic, built from 1970 to 1996. Land Rover called it a car for all reasons, and underneath the marketing sat the same structural formula that made the utility Land Rover survive decades of neglect. A box section steel chassis and an aluminum alloy body, this time wrapped around a 3.5-liter Buick-derived V8 instead of a tractor engine. Coil springs replaced the old leaf spring setup and doubled the available axle travel. Permanent 4-wheel drive came standard from the first 2-door model in 1970, and by 1981 the 4-door arrived. Having already proven off-road capability and genuine highway manners were not mutually exclusive claims. Power grew steadily from 125 horsepower on the original carbureted 3.5 to 200 horsepower on the fuel-injected 4.2-liter LSE by 1992. The V8 rewards one habit above everything else: change the oil every 6,000 miles and the camshaft lives a long life. Skip that and the tappity knock arriving at idle is the sound of a very expensive repair bill introducing itself. Buying a Range Rover Classic now says you wanted the Land Rover engineering case without the utility vehicle interior, and roughly 317,000 people made that same bet between 1970 and 1996. Driver quality examples in the United States run from $12,000 to $25,000. Restored cars clear $40,000 and climbing, and the number that should worry you more than either price is the one at the A posts and B posts, because rust there, not the drivetrain, is what actually ends a Range Rover Classic's life. Some Land Rovers never reached a showroom at all. Number 4, the Land Rover 101 forward control, built from 1972 to 1978. Land Rover never sold a single one to a civilian off the production line. Every unit went straight to the British Army as a gun tractor, purpose-built to tow the L-118 light gun and a ton of ammunition across ground. Nothing wheeled was supposed to cross, and multiple independent production records converge on a total close to 2,669 units across the entire run. The forward control cab sits the driver above and ahead of the front axle, so the whole vehicle fits as a cuboid inside a transport aircraft instead of wasting space on a bonnet. Underneath that unusual shape sits a 3.5-liter Rover Vive 8, the same LT95 gearbox and integral transfer case borrowed from the Range Rover, and a separate box section chassis strong enough that the type-towed field artillery at a genuine 75 miles per hour on the road, fast for anything wearing a military badge. Sources disagree on one detail, whether the suspension is coil or leaf sprung, and rather than repeat whichever version sounded more confident, that specific point stays unconfirmed here until a workshop manual settles it. Real hammer prices tell a calmer story than the online rumor mill suggests. Recent UK auction results for genuine 101 forward controls have landed between roughly £14,600 and £16,300, not the $30,000 figures that circulate in enthusiast forums, and one US dealer listing for a rare 24-volt configuration claims only about 10 examples of that specific build currently exist stateside. Own one, and you are not buying a Land Rover that happened to survive. You are buying the one Land Rover that was never allowed to fail, because the alternative was a crew short of ammunition. Land Rover eventually built something a family could use. Number 3, the Discovery, first generation, built from 1989 to 1998. Land Rover did not design a new drivetrain for its first family-focused SUV. It borrowed the same 200 TDI diesel already proven in the Defender and the Range Rover Classic. Then later the refined 300 TDI from 1994 onward, and wrapped both in a 5-door body with 2 rows of seats. The 200 TDI and 300 TDI engines can still be running well past 200,000 miles, according to specialist Land Rover publications that track this exact platform, and the shared parts bin means a Discovery owner can walk into almost any independent Land Rover garage and find someone who already knows the engine code. The one genuine trap sits inside the timing cover. The 200 TDI is an interference engine, meaning a failed timing belt lets the valves and pistons meet each other, and the belt itself sits fully enclosed where it cannot be inspected during a routine service. Owners who skip the belt interval on schedule are not gambling with a breakdown. They are gambling with the whole top end of the engine. The gearbox has its own quiet trap too. The LT77 box paired with the 200 TDI needs Dexron automatic transmission fluid, not the manual gear oil every other Land Rover of the era takes, and putting the wrong fluid in accelerates wear nobody notices until the synchros start crunching. Choose a Discovery one over a Defender from the same years, and you are choosing the family that comes with the truck, the same durable diesel wearing a school-run body instead of a farmgate body. Put that engine back in the original farm body. Number 2, the Defender 200 TDI. Built from 1990 to 1994. This is the exact moment the Defender name appears, created specifically to separate the working truck from the new family-shaped Discovery that launched the same year, and Land Rover marked the occasion by fitting its first direct injection turbo diesel to the line. The 200 TDI replaced a naturally aspirated diesel that had genuinely fallen behind the rest of the market, and the jump in both power and fuel economy was large enough that overland specialists still specifically hunt for 200 TDI Defenders decades later, because the engine can be diagnosed and rebuilt with nothing more sophisticated than a socket set and a workshop manual written in plain English. That mechanical honesty is not exaggerated. There is no engine control unit deciding whether the fuel pump gets to work. There is a mechanical injection pump, a turbocharger, and a cast iron block that tolerates neglect better than almost anything built after it. Owners who cross a desert in one carry spare parts measured in pounds, not gigabytes. Buying a 200 TDI Defender in the United States now means importing it, since the model only became eligible under the federal 25-year rule in the past several years, and completed imports typically run $10,000 to $20,000 on top of the purchase price once shipping and customs are added. That total often still lands below what a single major repair costs on the electronically managed diesels that came after it, and that math, more than any nostalgia, is why the 200 TDI keeps finding new American owners. Land Rover refined that engine once, never topped it. Number 1. The Defender 300 TDI, built from 1994 to 1998. Land Rover took the 200 TDI, gave it a new block, a redesigned cylinder head, better cooling, and a single serpentine belt instead of the old multi-belt setup, and the result is the engine multiple independent specialist, now called the most reliable power plant the company has ever built. With proper maintenance, these engines regularly exceed 310,000 miles, and Land Rover trusted the design enough to keep building it with only minor modifications for British Army Wolf Defenders well into the 2000s, years after the mainstream UK market had already moved on to something more sophisticated. The military did not choose it for refinement. It chose it because a broken down truck in a war zone is a truck that gets soldiers killed, and this was the engine that did not break down. It is not flawless. Early 300 TDI units suffered timing belt alignment problems serious enough that Land Rover issued a dedicated repair kit under part numbers STC4095K and STC4096K, and cylinder 4 remains the weak point on any example that has spent time running hot, since the iron block and aluminum head expand at different rates under sustained heat, and the gasket between them eventually loses that argument. The number that actually settles it is this one. A new 2026 Defender starts at $65,350 for the base 4-cylinder and climbs past $115,000 for a V8 90, a genuine 300 TDI Defender, imported under the federal 25-year rule, recently sold at auction for $22,000, with pristine factory original examples pushing toward $200,000 for the rarest specification. 70% was never proof, 10 chassis numbers, and their VIN plates.